Welcome to the Branding Room Only podcast, where we share career stories, strategies, and lessons learned on how industry leaders and influencers have built their personal brands. Now, let's get started with the show. Hi, everyone. It's Paula, Edgar, host of the Branding Room Only podcast. And on the Branding Room Only podcast, what we do is we talk to influencers and professionals about their personal brands, how they built them, lessons learned, and advice they may have about personal brands. And today I'm very excited because I have a guest who vicariously I met, and now I actually have the opportunity to meet and talk about something that's very important to me, and I know to a lot of my listeners. Let me introduce you to Mihalich Levin. She believes in empowering working parents. Me too, girl. She is the founder and CEO of Mindful Return, the author of Back to Work After Baby, How to Plan and Navigate a Mindful Return from Maternity Leave, and co-host of the Parents at Work podcast. She is also the co-chair of the inaugural DC chapter of the Postpartum Support International, PSI. Lori is mama to two wonderful redheaded boys, ages 10 and 12, and is a healthcare lawyer in private practice. Her thought leadership has been featured in publications including Forbes, The Washington Post, New York Times Parenting, and Thrive Global. Lori, welcome to the Branding Room Only podcast.
I'm so excited to be here with you, Paula. And I have to make an addendum to what you just said, because yesterday my son turned 13 and he would be so offended if I were going around telling everybody that he was still 12. So anyway.
Redacted. 13. And this is important because now there's teen behind that number. So I 100% get it. Speaking of brands.
Yes, exactly. Yes. I am now the brand of someone who has a teenager in their house.
Welcome to the jungle.
I'm only 24 hours in, so I have no idea what that means yet.
I'll tell you. So Lori, thank you for being on the podcast. Tell me, what does a personal brand mean to you? How do you define it?
I define it as other people's perception of me in the marketplace. And by marketplace, I mean anybody who's choosing you to do anything.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, yes, because any interaction is a part of a market. Yes, I agree with that 100%. All right, so tell me, how would you define yourself in 3 words or short phrases?
Okay, so I once took the Clifton Strengths Finder, so I'm going to use one of those, which is activator. If I see a problem, I can't just sit on my hands or ignore it. I have to go out and do something about it. Second word is hugger. And that is because during the pandemic, when I could not go out and hug everybody, I realized how important that is to me. So to know me is to hug me. And then number 3 is thinker. And I think I'm a thinker. I see the double-edged sword of each of these, and one of them is sometimes I overthink things, yes. But I do believe that I put a lot of thought and intentionality into the work that I do.
I love that. And I also love hugger. And you just took me right back to I was talking to my husband about this recently. I was like, do you remember what was terrible in 2020 when I only had the opportunity to hug y'all?
You? Yes, exactly.
Like the people who live in
They were overhugged that year.
Right. I was like, that was terrible.
Yes.
Okay. So do you have a favorite quote or mantra?
Yes. And I adopted it when I became a working parent and had to leave work at the end of the day. And my cheeks would get red because everybody else was still working, but my daycare was about to close and they were going to charge me $10 a minute if I was late. And it's the Teddy Roosevelt quote, "Comparison is the thief of joy."
Yes.
Like, you do you, lady.
Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm. Also, thinking about those $10 per minute fees, yes. I would turn into like the Flash. Yes. Good stuff. Okay. What about this? What is your hype song? What is the song that you use when you are coming in full Lori self and want to show people what they're going to get, or you're having a terrible day and you need to pick yourself up? It could be the same song or a different one.
Yeah. So definitely I can speak to the latter. This is the terrible day. I'm still standing. Yeah. That's the one that comes out. Yes.
A bit.
And I mean, just like one of my favorite songs that just makes me feel happy is 525,600 Minutes from Rent.
Rent. Yes.
Yeah.
So I am doing a playlist of everybody's songs, and it is the most eclectic, fantastic, wonderful thing.
Awesome.
I am loving it. So thank you for that.
Sure.
So Lori, tell me about your career story, and then segue into that. Like, what was it like when you returned to work yourself? Like, what was your maternity leave and return to work back? like?
Yeah. So I came to Washington, D.C. specifically to go to law school. And I knew I wanted a regulatory legal practice. And I knew that because one, I was like a policy geek and did policy in undergrad. And two, I love foreign languages. And I've decided at that point that reading regulations and translating them to English was sort of like reading foreign languages. And so I went to law school. I started working in the healthcare practice of a big firm and became a Medicare reimbursement lawyer, sort of by falling into a group that had some great mentors. And I started representing hospitals and health systems. And then I went in-house for a number of years at the Association of American Medical Colleges and practiced, I was doing policy work while I was there. I wasn't practicing law. And that's where I had my two babies. Mm-hmm. And when I had my sons, I am most certain that I had undiagnosed postpartum anxiety. And I found in the world so many amazing supports out there for the baby, right? All the things we could learn how to do, massage your baby and how to puree baby food for your baby and how to pump milk for your baby and how to make a birth plan to get, for the baby's arrival. But nothing about the personal and professional identity shift and identity crisis, quite frankly, that I was going through as a working person. Yeah. And so, in all my spare time with a 2-year-old and an 11-month-old at home, I decided that I really wanted to do something about this gap in the marketplace. Mm-hmm. And I created a program called Mindful Return that helps new parents through that transition back to work after parental leave. Mm-hmm. So I did that sort of as my side gig at night, 15, 20 minutes a day, for many days. And then about a year and a half in, I pivoted back to law firm life. Something I swore I would never do, and learned a lesson that I should just never say never about anything in my life. And I went back to law firm world as a partner at Denton's, but on a 60% schedule. And I did 60% law and 40% mindful return. And I grew my business for about 6 years. And then 2.5 years ago, I left big law, went out on my own. I now practice law as my side gig under the GME group is my brand. And I practice law in about 10% of my professional work week. Mm-hmm. And I run this program, Mindful Return, in the other 90% of the week. And we partner with 109 employers and we have 20 people on our team. And it's grown over the past decade to be something that I never could have imagined as like risk-averse baby lawyer however many years ago.
So tell me, what is the nature of the program? So how do you work with employers to support folks when they're returning back?
Yeah, so I like to say that what we do is in 2 different buckets. One bucket is that we provide courses for new parents in a cohort, and it's asynchronous. And we run a 4-week program every other month that employers send their employees to participate in. And so you are in a group of other people who are all returning to work around the same time you are, but from all different employers. Mm-hmm. And we put them through a curriculum that focuses on 4 themes. Mindset, so like how to get your head in a better place to go back. Logistics, all of the how to navigate the childcare transition and what your schedule is going to look like and how you're going to feed yourself at night, et cetera. The third piece is about leadership and really encouraging new parents to think about the skills that they are gaining through parenthood and how they're directly applicable to their jobs. Mm-hmm. And then the 4th week is about building and staying in community, mostly so you don't wind up isolated and crying on the kitchen floor like I did for a long time in new parenthood. And then the second bucket is workshops and webinars. We do a lot of training for managers of people who are supervising people going out on parental leave. We do, work-life integration workshops. We do talks and webinars specifically for the new parents about how to make the transition. So the courses are one piece, and then the workshops and webinars are another piece.
I love the cohort piece because I feel like, parenting, motherhood, and specific, I'm thinking about myself, is such a wonderful. I've known since I was a little kid I was going to be a mother. Yeah. And then I was like, oh no.
What was that thing I said I wanted? Yeah.
Right. It was like, wait, they don't turn off. You have to keep mothering them no matter what.
The rest of your life.
Yeah, for the rest of your life. And the shift in the idea of it, and then the actual piece of it, I think when you said identity shift, it was more like a crisis. It was like,
yes, no, massive identity crisis.
Okay, you're just supposed to sit there and look cute, not cry all the time and do this other stuff. And you don't know who you are in that moment until you start to learn who you are again. And so when I think about this, and particularly about your brand, and being a parent, should you choose that as a path, is a brand shift, right? You're not the same person, whether you adopt, step parent, any of those things, it changes who you are. And so my question for you is, how do you think becoming a parent changed you and who you were before and then post parenting, or not in parenting and not post parenting, post having kids, that part?
Oh, it changed everything, Paula. It definitely heightened a lot of skills that, were sitting latent, or I was a much more impatient person prior to having children. I was a much less flexible person prior to having children. I think having to be there with the small human being who has like 100 problems in one day that you don't know how to solve causes you to problem solve really quickly. So I think a lot of skills that I think are fantastic leadership skills are things that I developed specifically because of parenthood. I think it just gave me a completely different perspective on the importance of the time that I spend with people as well. I don't know, I could go on and on about all the benefits, but and I appreciate your note about no matter how you came to parenthood, you can have these benefits. Two little points. One, Mindful Return started just focused on moms, and then we quickly realized that dads needed the support too. So we have a cohort specifically for dads. And the other thing I want to note is that there's some neuroscience research out there, particularly a woman named Dr. Ruth Feldman, Yale Medical School, who has discovered that the most neuroplastic our brain is in the entire adult human experience is in the 1 year following the birth of one's child. And that is like, no matter how you came to interact with that little one, they just make your brain do all sorts of amazing things.
So, a part of my stuff that I do is DEI. And I always say that if you want to be humbled and you want to realize how to be open to the world, interact with children, because they see things very much like everything is fine. I don't really care if you're different. I just want to play, right?
Yes.
They're not, and it's our interactions with them that shifts that space for them. And I studied anthropology when I was in college, and it's true. Like, we often will, collect in sort of cultures and groups, but kids are always very open. And so when you said some of the leadership skills, I realized that one of the leadership skills that I received is to have a better, more open mind because I had. And
absolutely.
Yeah. So the irony I find about this whole parenting life and parenthood is that it's necessary. Like, we have to continue to make the world, like, we have to continue to populate the world, right? It's necessary. One. But then there is this sort of brand globally that sometimes it feels like a detriment. Right? It feels like something
motherhood bias, yes.
Right. Yeah. That
motherhood forfeit.
Exactly. That it is, we need it, but we don't want it. We right. We need it, we don't respect it. But to your point just now, there are skills, strategic, necessary skills that are built when you make that transition.
And we don't talk about those enough.
We don't. And they can be leveraged in such great ways. So what are some of the things that you see? And you mentioned some, right? You said flexible, problem solver, right? Like, those, what are some other skills that you see, maybe from yourself, but also from the folks who you've worked with, that develop and can be leveraged in whatever area they're in?
Yeah, I think deep empathy, I might have said that one, but the ability to meet the needs of demanding clients who can't articulate their needs very clearly comes to mind.
Yeah.
The ability to teach and to mentor, right? When you're in an office setting, those same skills that you use to sit and teach your kid how to tie a shoe might be similar to what you're teaching a first-year associate how to do with a memo. I mean, it's all very related. Yes.
That's a really good
time management is one. I think, I mean, prioritization is like at the top, right? Working parents don't have time for drama or extraneous stuff. Like, we get the stuff done and we move on. So that's a big one. No nonsense. I've talked to people who have observed members of their team have children and come back. And some of them have said things like they grew up really quickly and because they had to, they came back more mature than whenever they left. So I think
it'll humble you, that part. You think your lens on the world is a very different one. Some of the things I think that we tolerate or ignore it even it's much more clear because you're seeing it through the eyes of somebody else. And I always say it's a little bit of an ego thing too, right? Like when I said I was little, I knew I was gonna have a kid. I didn't think about it like I am going to leave my legacy onto the onto the world. But now I think about like who are they becoming? Like what am I teaching them?
Yeah.
And my therapist says once they're like 10, you're no longer parenting, you're mentoring. And I was like, damn, why didn't you tell me that when they were 9?
Exactly.
Shoot.
Yeah, there is that shift that occurs for sure.
Yeah, right. Because they've learned the core skills and now you're just showing them how to navigate, which is scary. But I want to go back to thinking about the experience, and particularly I think for mothers, and you can also bring in anything that you've noticed about fathers who have had parental leave as well. That support in that shift, and also being self-aware and maybe knowing that you're not okay, right? And that you may need additional support. Like what does that look like? Because I know, and I think about this, I probably had baby blues, but I didn't realize either. And I was like, thank goodness for said spouse who's sitting here being like, hey, let's go outside and you can get some sunshine. And I was like, no, I just want to put my head over the blanket and that's it.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that I know there's some reflections definitely in the book, but tell me some things that you think that folks need to hear.
Yeah. Well, the first thing that I want to say is that I think especially in the United States, we tend to go to, there's something wrong with me.
Yeah.
Before we say there's actually something super wrong with the whole system. And I want to just put that out there first, that we don't have paid parental leave as a national policy in this country. And so the average amount of time that a person takes for parental leave is 2 weeks. And no kidding, of course you're not feeling okay after 2 weeks. You just gave birth to a child. So until our country focuses on paid parental leave, on childcare that doesn't break the bank, on systems and supports that are in place for families with young children, I think we're going to continue to have a lot of people who have lots of struggles because the system is set up for them to fail. I'll get off of that soapbox for a minute, but
no, stay on it if you want. Oh my God, it's true.
And employers can do great things, and there are employers who are providing 16 or 18 weeks of paid leave, and in the U.S. that's considered amazing. Abroad, not so much, but in the US, that's good. You're just getting past the 3-month sleep regression, right? I mean, if you recall, at 3 months, the baby's brain is exploding and then they stop sleeping. And that is right at the moment when most people in this country have returned or are returning to work.
Wow.
So, I mean, some things to notice in yourself definitely are the tears, frequently the inability to shake a mood. I'd say if you're asking yourself, is it possible that I might have postpartum anxiety or postpartum depression? The mere fact that you are asking that question means you should go out, talk to a therapist. You should go to a medical provider. One of the reasons I was very passionate about helping to get a postpartum support international chapter up in DC is that I think that there's not enough education by OBGYNs and pediatricians and the healthcare providers who we do interact with around perinatal mental health. And so one thing I know PSI is very involved in is making sure that providers of all different varieties can get education so that they can be screening. I mean, if you screen, then of course there's the question, well, what do you do if you find someone who needs extra support? But I never asked the question. And I recall sitting in my OB's office, bawling my eyes out, and her basically being like, time for the next meeting, you'll be okay. And anyway,
no, that's, I really wanted to kind of delve into this part of the conversation because somebody very dear to me also has just had a baby and I am having vicarious postpartum depression challenges thinking about how it was from that, because it was hard, but looking at it from being outside in and then thinking about it being in it, there's nothing, I can't connect it to anything else that I've ever experienced because you can't run. You can't, but it is you have to kind of push through it. But some people can't push through it without having support. And to your point about there not being screenings or folks they're not being sort of a holistic space to even feel open about, people don't tell doctors the truth anyway, right? And then having all of that is set up for failure. To your point about systems and structures that we have, it's systemic on the structural, but also institutional things. And then you have that individual. I'm thinking about the intersection of the parenting, motherhood, et cetera, and people and women of color.
Mm-hmm.
And there this being this perception that you shouldn't be asking for help.
Mm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And then
Mm-hmm.
what does that then mean for our experiences and how and what we hold in and what it means for our children in that point where, that can hurt, I should say, your milk flow if you decide that you're going to breastfeed, like all of that.
Yes. I mean, maternal mortality rates for Black women, it's just terrifying, right?
Yes.
And so, yes, we need more institutional support. We need more intersectional studies. All the things, Paula, all the things.
So I tabbed a couple pages in the book because I'm a good lawyer.
and all lawyers need tabs, yes.
All lawyers need tabs, and seriously. There's a part where you are saying that there are some rules, essentially, some things you should remember to make you a happy person. One is we're all beginners. And I love that. I sat with that for a little bit. I was like, whoa, if we just remember that, oh, by the by, this is not something that comes naturally. All of a sudden, you're not wearing a flowing gown and your hair is done up. And then you're not.
Yeah.
And it's also like the kid is a beginner too. They haven't done this either.
Especially with the first kid. I mean, I had a lot harder time with nursing, for example, with my first baby, because I didn't know what I was doing and he didn't know what he was doing. With the second baby, I knew what I was doing and he didn't know, so I was able to sort of guide him. But, things were very rough that first time around. Yeah, we are all beginners. Even if you wanted to have the baby since you were 5, and even if you babysat for all the neighborhood's kids, you never had them 24/7 under your roof and had to map out nap schedules and things like that. It is a totally different world.
You never had them 24/7 is 100%. I'm pulling that quote out. You never had them. It is a changed experience.
Yeah.
And so I was just thinking about this piece. And so for those of you who are listening or watching, this is important. I think that in the world and in media, et cetera, there is this perception that kids and babies, again, if you're choosing to breastfeed, that they know how to do it. Like you immediately, they crawl to you on your chest and then no, that is not what happened. I was literally like, hey, it's not doing what it's supposed to do. Make it do what it's supposed to do.
Yeah.
And so another favorite part I have in this book is about outsourcing, which is my parenting superpower. I'm like, if somebody else can do it, they should.
Mm-hmm.
But outsourcing when it comes to getting support, like a doula, right? Like having, somebody to just come and support, whether that's family members or something, is so, so important and can help you with this other piece. So I just wanted to kind of open that piece up because that we are beginners, which means we need help, like mentoring, to your point.
Yes. No, I was just going to say, and I was like I can do this myself, new parent, it was like my personality. It was like, I'm a lawyer. I figure stuff out. I don't need extra anything. And wow, was that the wrong approach? Because then I did figure stuff out myself, but I figured it out. It took me a lot longer to figure the stuff out. And I was a lot more isolated and depressed in figuring it all out. And you don't have to do it that way.
We need to normalize this conversation. I feel like so often it's very much like a surprise because what to expect when you're expecting isn't like, girl, let me tell you. that should be a podcast. We're like, here's what to expect. And because we're not necessarily passing down the information culturally in a way that we consistently culturally, then it's challenging, right? Like the experience of having to parent a baby, right? If you had a child, and also healing, right? That I think leads to that depression because you're changing.
Yeah.
And it hurts. And then you got to make sure this kid is okay. Look,
all while worrying. I was going to say, all while worrying whether someone's taking it over all of your book of business while you're going back, or if people are going to look down on you whenever you return. I mean, all of that is hanging over you while you're trying to keep the baby alive and recover yourself. Sorry.
Perfect. No. That's a perfect segue because we could probably do a whole podcast just on the part postpartum before you go back to work, right? But when you think about the actual return, and I love that the program in the book has this part about mindfulness in it, because I think sometimes it's like, just return. Go back. Figure it out.
Everything's the same.
But you're saying it needs to be a thought out thing, a strategic thing. Tell me why. Tell me what that means for you and the resources and advice that you give? Like, what's the mindful piece of it for you?
Yeah. So first of all, I like to remind people that the return to work after having a baby is not an event. It is a process. It is not a 1 day, 1 week, like, oh, okay, everything's good. I have people who they come to me and they say, but I've been back for a week and I still don't feel normal. And I'm like, oh, sweetie, you've been back for what? Barely 5 days, right? It is a 1 year process of figuring out how to do all the baby things to come back into yourself. And I think I probably felt a little bit more finally like me after a year. I like to focus with new parents on micro mindfulness because people think, oh, mindfulness, I need to sit and meditate for an hour or whatever. No, you don't have that kind of time when you're a brand new parent. But I think people really tend to underestimate the value of really small but meaningful interventions. So here's an example, two that come to mind. One, somebody when I was a new parent said to me, hey, Lori, it's a good idea to set an intention for your day, to help put your brain on a better path. And I was like, oh, that sounds great. Okay, I'll set an intention for my day. And then like 5, 6, 7, 8 p.m. would roll around and I'd be like, well, I guess I forgot to do that. So I created an acronym for myself called ISS. I probably share this in the book, which, is a form of it, to be or is. And the I stands for set an intention. The first S stands for stretch. And the next S stands for savor, or vice versa. And I do this in the shower every morning. I still do it like 10 years later. So I'm in the shower in the morning, which presumably you need to do if you're going to leave the house and you had baby gunk all over you. So, get the child detached from your physical being for a few minutes.
That's the other S.
Yes. And right. And so I is for intention. So the intention might be go to bed at 9 p.m. tonight, even if the sink is full of bottle parts, because you are ridiculously exhausted. Or the I might be just to tell yourself, I am enough today, no matter what happens. Or the I might be get that one project done at work that is hanging over your head because, gosh, darn it, it is bringing you stress. Then the S, first S is stretch, right? So do a couple of yoga poses in the shower, touch your toes, something simple, and then savor. Savor that moment when you are in the shower, the water is hot, you are alone, you have a house, there might be baby crap all over the place, but you have the baby crap, that moment of gratitude.
Yeah.
The other micro mindfulness strategy that I really like is to sort of shift gears before you sit down to work. And for me, when I commuted downtown in Washington, D.C., I would ride the metro and I would take the metro and then I would get off the metro and I would have like a 5 to 10 minute walk to my office. And in that time, I would either find a park bench or a hotel lobby and I would sit down with Insight Timer, which is a free app. And I now have some meditations on there for new parents on Insight Timer. And I would just either put a 5-minute bell on, like a timer on, or I'd listen to a guided meditation. And no one knew where I was for like those 5 minutes. And I say hotel lobby because it might have been raining or whatever. But it was the way for me to like take off my mom hat and put on the work hat before I walked in the door. And you can do this at home too. If you're working remotely, you don't have to run into your laptop and open it and just delve in. You can just sit and breathe for a minute and remember that you're switching roles before you actually switch them. So the mindset piece does not have to take time. It's just about pausing and being more intentional.
I love that. I mean, I love intentions just generally. I think that they're powerful, but they take time. And so to your point about doing things, incorporate it into something that you already should be doing at least.
Yes. Or do it while you're brushing your teeth or whatever it is. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. So you return to work. You got this home thing. You've gone to the hotel. You've done your Insight Timer, and you walk into the office. You are now different, but you are the same. But you're different, but you are the same. Yeah. How do you, I think, consciously and strategically figure out how to project voice who you now are after having this change?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think every day you figure it out anew.
Yeah.
And I think different people have different levels of comfort talking about the home life and the struggles that they're going through. I think it's very helpful if you can identify a couple of people at your office with whom you can be real about what you're going through so that it's not everyone who's in the dark about coming back. I also always encourage new parents to remember that the more they can get a little brave and talk about this reality when they're returning, the better modeling they're doing for the people who are coming after them, who maybe won't see it as such a shock the second time around. So, there's always that question of how loud am I about my parenting at work? There's a woman, Mary Beth Ferrante, who likes to say like, we should be parenting out loud in our office and parenting out loud, at home. And for me, like the distinction that I drew when I was at the law firm was with my colleagues, I was 100% like, this is my schedule and this is how I'm rolling. And today's not a good day. And one of my bosses always said, when your hair was in a ponytail, I knew it was not a good night of sleep, But with my clients, whenever I was at the firm, I would just say, I'm not available or whatever. I didn't always get into the details unless I was super close to the client. So I think it's totally possible to have different levels of that relationship and to share different amounts with different people, depending on your relationship with them.
I think that is really excellent advice, because I do think people think it's 0 or 10, right? And it's anything that has authenticity to do with it. There's scales of it. You're never always one of those things, or never. It's always you, but it's scales of you in that space. And I definitely believe in that when it comes to motherhood. So I want to talk about a 2-part thing. One is the coming back to work and navigating the expectations that already existed for you before. Then I want to talk about the navigating the expectations that people have put on you because they think that you can't because you are now a parent. How? Lori, tell me. I'm furious. I'm like mad thinking about it, but I know that this is the sort of space that people end up being in. How do you, what are your suggestions or thoughts about navigating this?
I think we're like zooming back out to systemic problems, aren't we now? Right. So first of all, I think it's very important when you come back, and let's rewind. It's important before you go out on leave to think about and maybe to articulate the things that you definitely want to take back when you come back versus things that you want to let go of. So your leave can be a fantastic opportunity to move some of the things on your plate off to other people who maybe you've evolved past a role and long overdue for someone else to take it over. This could be a great time. It can also be a really great growth opportunity for others on your team. But if you're involved and engaged in that conversation, then you can help steer it more than if other people just like pick up pieces of what you took on and do it willy-nilly, and then you don't get the work back that you wanted to get back, right? So I think to the extent you can sit and reflect and like journal about it and take some notes and then share your thoughts on what you want your role to look like when you come back, I think that's sort of taking some ownership over your role in your career. Then there's the expectations, as you said, that people are putting on you. Maybe you have people on your team who say, oh, you're back, fantastic. And then they dump like 5,000 things on you that are all due tomorrow. And you're like, and I did want to sleep tonight and maybe nurse my baby. Right. Or you have the people who say, oh, no, don't give her that big project. Or like, she's not going to want to travel for that deposition because she's got the new baby, right? And that is something I think we just have to work on one manager at a time. One of the things I do a fair amount of in Mindful Return World is manager training, right? So telling managers what this process might be like flagging some issues that they might want to talk about or raise, but also teaching managers not to make assumptions about things, and right, to ask the person if while they're out on leave, do they want to be invited to a big client dinner that's happening, or do you want no communication? Ask. Don't make an assumption. Do you want to be put on that big case that's going to involve travel to California? They might want to be put on the big case that involves travel to California because that is their professional goal, and they have a whole system in place, and they're going to be sending the milk back via milk stork, and they've got childcare lined up. And you just deprive them of a professional opportunity by saying, oh, they can't do that because they have a baby. Or maybe they don't want to travel, and that's true, but you won't know unless you ask. So again, I get on a soapbox about this, but don't make assumptions about your employees.
I love soapboxes because
okay, good.
that's where our passion lies. And I think that's where our advocacy lies, right? Like, it's like, okay, I'm going to tell you all about this. I can tell you, I have done a lot of work with a lot of leaders in organizations, including in law firms. I always say I'm a trusted advisor to mostly white male partners. And a lot of the questions that they have around how they can do things better or differently has to do with gender, and particularly with dealing with moms and how to navigate. Like, oh, my mentee, Sheila, she is the best thing ever. but she's pregnant. And I'm like,
so first of all, circle the word but.
Right.
Like,
I'm
why is that in the sentence? Anyway.
Right. And I'm like, oh no, is it a bad pregnant? Like, cause I'm like, aren't we happy? Yay. Like she's pregnant. And also it is not a death sentence. It is pregnancy, right? It's a part of what we do, right? Or parenting generally, it's part of what to my point earlier. We don't get to continue this life thing if we don't parent. And then one person in particular I'm remembering was saying to me, look, I really want, she's up for partner next year. We can do this, but it's going to impact me if she decides to pull out. So I'm not going to put her forward. And I was like, what?
Come again.
Literally, he was like, when you sponsor somebody, you're aligning your brand with theirs, right? And he's like, well, what if she comes back and then she's not the same? And then I've already said that she's my person. And I was like, have you ever had a conversation with this woman about this? One. Number two, why are you assuming the bad part as opposed to what if she comes back and she's got 10,000 more skills than she had before? Because that's probably more likely what it's going to be. And
we don't have that narrative. Nobody talks about the skills.
Those discussions don't even happen. And so getting in a space of, to your point, of asking is ideal for any kind of inclusion, which is this what this is, right? To make it better and to make it more open for folks. I'm glad that is something that we have touched on. When I think about personal branding, and I'm going to pull it back to this, I think about you have to self-assess, be self-aware, and then think about what your identity is and what your values are. And when you have that addition and shift, it can change how you show up in the workplace. And so we've talked about the space of, expectations, and we've changed, the space about whether you should talk about it openly or not, and kind of modulating that space. But what are your thoughts about using the skills and using the strategy that you might have for yourself in your career, but using parenthood as a lever for that, as opposed to something that you may want to push down? I'm probably not being as articulate as I want to be. What I want to say is, how can we use this as a elevating strategy as opposed to something that we feel as something's bad?
Yeah. Well, I have one example, which is around annual reviews. I had a Mindful Return alumnus come to us and say, hey, I was out for so many months this year. I don't think I should fill out my review. It just doesn't seem to make sense. And one of the principles that we teach in the Mindful Return course is that on your review, the year that you are coming back from parental leave, you should be building into that review all the things that you did to prepare your team for your departure and how you help the team integrate back in. And so I think that's sort of a very visible way of claiming credit for, first of all, the unseen invisible labor that went into preparing everybody for your departure, that the hidden office housework. This is one of the things that falls in that category. And then two, whenever the people on your team read your review, it will make that link for them to the skills that you've gained and that you're gaining and that you're sharing with the team through this process, that you helped train the team for the projects that you were passing off. And you took this, and this back on and helped successfully reintegrate. So you're sort of putting it in everybody's face a little bit that these parenting skills are relevant to the work that your team is doing.
100%. Another brand amplifier or detriment place can be when you yourself experience self-judgment or guilt. And what are your thoughts about kind of parents and having to navigate the guilt of not being around for some of the things that they may want to be around for, or any area of guilt that comes to mind about this?
Yeah. Oh, we could go on for a couple of hours here about the G word.
Settle in. I'm just kidding.
Yes. Okay, I have three thoughts I want to share about guilt.
Yeah.
One thing that helped me a lot when I was personally transitioning to working parenthood and feeling some of that guilt was Bridget Schulte's book, Overwhelmed: Work, Love, and Play When No One Has the Time. And in that book, she interviews a woman named Sarah Blaffer Hrdy, who is an evolutionary anthropologist. And she has studied women in the Kalahari Desert thousands of years ago and discovered that the women left their babies back at camp and went off to work. And the babies were taken care of by whom she calls allo parents, who are people who step up and support the parents, in the community. And so when I made the connection to, okay, like historically for thousands of years, it has not just been the mother only who is taking care of the child, but instead an entire community, that helped sort of normalize and put it into a historical context for me. The second thing that I like to tell new parents is the first time a baby does something, it doesn't count until you see it. It's that whole, like, if a tree falls in a forest and nobody was around, did it make a sound, right? Your baby could learn to stand up in his crib in the middle of the night, or while you were in the bathroom, they could take their first step. Or, it's not because you went to work that you missed this first thing. And I also tell people around that guilt that your childcare provider can be instructed not to tell you when certain things happen. And I did not even know that my daycare had a policy of not telling us when the baby firsts happened. But one night, our oldest son came home. He was, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 months. I don't remember. And he started clapping at the kitchen table. And we're like, oh my gosh, he's clapping. And we took a video and we called the grandparents. And then we went into the daycare the next day and we said, he just learned how to clap. And they said, we know. And it did not diminish my joy.
Yeah.
Because it happened before. Who cares? I saw it. I was excited. Okay, so the last thing I'll say about guilt is something I learned from a really wonderful leadership coach named Lauren Gordon. She's a working mom coach as well. And she says, when you find that your brain is saying the words, I feel guilty because, ... I feel guilty because I have to stay late tonight to finish this project, whatever. Flip that around and change those words to, I made this decision because. I made this decision to stay late tonight to get this project done so that tomorrow I can be present with my child at X, Y, and Z time, right? So it's a much more empowering perspective to acknowledge why you chose something as opposed to dwelling in that guilt. We're all going to feel guilty sometimes. I think I've heard Dr. Pooja Lakshman talk about guilt tolerance. Like, we need to build guilt tolerance around saying no to things.
Yeah.
And that's an important skill to grow through parenthood.
I love the whole framework, and I'm glad you brought up that part, because if you didn't bring up the part about the reframing, and I love that part of the book. I was like, yes. But in particular, the part about it's not being the first time until you've seen it, I was like, this is a game changer. Yes. It is, because you see like every insert brand here commercial on television where babies walk in or pamp whatever, and you're like, oh no. And it reminded me, like, when I had my daughter when I was in law school. So I got married my first year, I had a baby my second year, bought a house the third year, all the things you should not do. But when I was studying for the bar, she was just kind of up and starting to get moving. And I felt terrible because I would leave in the morning at 7 o'clock and I wouldn't come back till 11 because I needed to be someplace else in order to study.
Yeah.
And I was like, my husband was like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to see her walking. He's like, she's going to be walking the rest of her life. You can see her then. And it was such a, like, I said to him, I was like, you don't know how much that gave me, because I felt like, oh, you're absolutely right. But in my mind, I was like, well, that's my baby. I created those legs. I have to walk. Right? Yep. So I hope that what you just said is as hopeful and helpful and empowering to women and parents just generally, right? Because you don't, like, and they're going to continue doing it, God willing, right? All of those things. The first is not the only, and it's all good. It's all good.
She'll be walking for the rest of her life.
I was like, and now she's in college. So I'm like, and I see her walking. I'm like, look, you're still
walking. Yep. And I'm watching it.
Exactly. I saw it. Oh my goodness. Well, I mean, number one, I feel like we could have this conversation over. Like, we could talk about so many different things. Right. And I know that we hopped all the way around. And I'm glad we did, because I think that somebody's going to get something out of everything. I want to just really focus 1 minute on parents who are not the child birther, right? Because the new wave of, rather than it being maternity leave and being parental leave, I think was a significant shift in society, one. And I know that there's still places that don't have leave for folks who are not the birthing parent. But I do think that is really where the change that we're looking for is going to come from, when we say, hey, parenting is not a solo sport. It shouldn't be, right? It is for some, so I'll acknowledge that. But when ideally you want to have 2 parents, right, and a community to support, and when people who are not the birthing parent take that leave, it shifts the world. So what do you say to parents, and it's primarily men who we're talking about, who are nervous about taking leave because of what it's going to mean for their brand and how they navigate their career?
Oh, Paula. Oh, soapboxes. Oh,
Step on up.
Yeah. So I hear this, and we're consistently coaching fathers in our programs about how to navigate these waters, because even if a policy is on the books, it doesn't mean that everybody's actually taking it. Yeah. There's research that shows that when a father who is in a leadership position in an organization takes his full amount of leave, all of the dads who are in his division follow suit. And so even if you do not do this for you, do it for all the dads who follow you. Do it for all the women who get stigmatized and penalized for saying that they're taking leave, or, oh heavens, they might one day take a leave, right? We'll never get to that point of true gender equality until we de-gender and de-stigmatize the taking of parental leave. Anecdote, when we were at that same conference a number of weeks ago, someone stood up in the session that I was leading and said that at her firm, the fathers have banded together and taken sort of an unofficial pledge to all take their full leave together in solidarity with the moms. And so there's also research that shows that women's careers are more successful when their partners, male partners, take parental leave. So do it for the success of the career of your significant other. And if you can't do it for any of those reasons, do it for your own child's future, so that you are modeling for them, even in a way distant way, that taking of leave, for your baby daughter or for your baby son, who might one day also want to live their full humanity and be considered a caregiver. It's a big one.
Yeah, I kind of felt like I could not start to close this without us touching on it, because it is a huge piece. When we think about going back to work, we're often thinking about mothers, but I'm like, I want it to be a mindful exit, and I want a mindful return, and I want more men to be thoughtful about this. So
yes. There was a Wall Street Journal article that just came out on Sunday that was all about the taking of paternity leave, and the idea that not only are you missing out on time with your child if you're not taking it, which is in itself invaluable, but you're leaving money on the table. You are literally leaving paid leave on the table, and what you could be compensated for while you're not at work if you don't go back. So that's another.
I love that. The business case for paternal. Yes. Do not waste your benefits.
Don't waste your benefits.
It's a point. It is a point. I love that. They're like, if it's not for the kids, make it for the money. It's all good. There you go. Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, I have had a really wonderful time having this conversation. So I'm going to start to wind us down to the end, which is, I want to know, for you, speaking of being ourselves and not just a mom, and I never say just, in addition to our momness, where's your fun factor? What are you doing for fun, Laura?
Well, first of all, I don't know if you can see it in the Zoom, but I do have fairy hair, which is like sort of.
I do. I was like, she's got it. Yes, I love the glitter.
My sparkles. In fact, I started wearing it whenever I was working as a partner at a law firm, and I had another partner come up to me at our global partner retreat and say, I just joined this firm a few months ago, and seeing you with the sparkles makes me happy I joined this firm. And I was like, there you go. There we go. The other fun factor of late has been our family's adventures to the national parks. And this is all related to my brand, because to personal brand and Mindful Returns brand, because most people in this country don't know that President Obama started a program that allows all fourth graders in this entire country and their families free access to all the national parks. So when you're a fourth grader, you pull into any national park and they say, roll down the window, show me the fourth grader, and there's a little pass, and anyone in the car gets in for free. So for our family, we've taken 2 cross-country trips to see a whole bunch of the most amazing things we've ever seen because of this program. So part of my fun factor and brand is like getting the word out about this amazing fourth grade program.
Well, you just did, because I'm going to make sure that people know. And now I have a 6th grader, and I'm mad. I would like a retroactive 4th grade in this.
Exactly. Yes. They don't do a very good job about raising the profile of the brand of that program.
Clearly not. Yes. Clearly not. Well, so I'm really glad that I asked that question and you shared that. So all of you with folks who are not up yet 4th grade, or who have them in 4th grade right now, it's time for a road trip. So, Lori, I asked folks 2 questions in my podcast, no matter what. And one is stand by your brand. And it's essentially, what is an aspect of your personal brand that you will never, ever compromise on?
Yeah, I will never compromise on making our programs be about community and connection. We had some courses that were just take it on your own, and that's not where the juicy growth and support really lies. So everything we do will always be about connecting you to other people who are going through the same struggles.
Yes. Struggles.
Of which there are many.
But I'm like, whoo, child. Okay. And then branding room only, which, okay, the podcast is called Standing Room Only. It is, or branding room only. It's a play on the standing room only.
Yes.
So the question is, what is the skill, experience, something that people will be standing in the room just to see you do, or for them to experience about you? What is that?
So 2 things come to mind. One, I'm a lawyer with high EQ. And I know how to bring people together and have empathy for situations while also navigating the politics of an organization. And then the other one, which is more relevant in my legal world, is that I'm a lawyer who speaks clear English. I translate, as I said before, regulations into things that people can understand. And I like to think I do that in my mindful return world too.
I love that. Especially because for those folks who maybe are not in a legal profession, saying I'm a lawyer with EQ probably just sounds like just a regular statement. But all the folks in the legal profession are like, child, yes, that is the people that stand in the room for, just because it is so often separated as things. Well, Lori, this has been a wonderful and wonderful conversation. You're welcome to come back and talk about whatever you want,
Thank you, Paula.
This is fantastic. Thank you so much. How can people connect with you and your work?
Absolutely. So our website is www.mindfulreturn.com. I do a Tuesday tip for working parents every week on Instagram at Mindful Return. You can feel free to connect with me over on LinkedIn and just say that you listen to Paula's podcast, and I'm happy to accept your LinkedIn invitation. And head over to whatever place you listen to podcasts and look for Parents at Work.
Fantastic. Well, everybody, make sure you tell a parent to be, a parent that is, and an employer that needs to know about this podcast, and spread the word, and find all your 4th graders too. Just find one so you can go to a park. Anyway, I'll see you when I see you. And thanks for being in the branding room. Bye.
Thanks, Paula.